Cuban authorities announced handover of pro-tempore presidency of the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean to Costa Rica. Bolivia's president-elect Luis Arce announced that he will restore relations with Cuba and Venezuela. Turkish army began withdrawal of its troops in 3 of its observation posts in the northern province of Idlib. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Gladys Quesada. This Tuesday, Cuban authorities announced that they will officially hand over the pro-tempore presidency of the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean to Costa Rica's government at the end of the month. The announcement was made by the Director of International Economic Bodies at the Cuban Ministry of Foreign Trade and Investment, Carlos Fidel Martín. According to the official ceremony, the ceremony will take place virtually on the occasion of the 38th session of the Commission to be held from October 26 to 28. The Cuban delegation will be led by President Miguel Díaz-Canel, who will be officially hand over the presidency of the Costa Rican representative. And 4 indigenous community organizations were murdered during the last 24 hours in Colombia due to 3 violent events in the departments of Huila, Cauca, and Córdoba. Social leaders Abelino Ipia and Héctor David Marín were shot dead on Monday night in the Huayco Alizal village in the Caucan municipality of Caldono. Also in the department of Huila, social and rural leader Eduardo Alarcón was murdered by a group of armed men who arrived at his farm on a motorcycle and shot him. These murders sum up to the assassination of the Embera leader Aurelio Jumi. According to the Colombian Institute for Peace Development, over 50 social leaders have been murdered in Colombia so far in 2020. And also in Colombia, Gustavo Herrera, former campaign manager for Senator Gustavo Petro and member of the Humane Colombia movement, was killed on Tuesday. According to local media, Herrera was attacked by unknown individuals who shot him 4 times on a road between the municipalities of Popayán and Puracé, located in the western department of Cauca. Meanwhile, Senator Gustavo Petro has also denounced the assassination of rural community leader Eduardo Alarcón Córdoba, who was also a member of a Humane Colombia movement in the southern department of Huila. Alarcón was shot several times by 2 men who broke into his home in Campo Alegre municipality. Ecuador's Electoral Dispute Tribunal has rejected the measure presented by the National Electoral Council, which granted the presidential running mates of the Union for Hope coalition 48 hours to correct observations in order to accept the registration to participate in the February 2021 presidential elections. Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, brings all the details.
We have the pronouncement of the Electoral Tribunal, and it has been in our favor.
The contentious Electoral Tribunal rejected the legal action presented against the resolution of the National Electoral Council that decided to grant 48 hours to the Democratic Center Binominal to correct observations.
Lo que sucedió el día de ayer refleja entonces.
What happened then reflects that the Ecuadorian people will play an important role in the electoral process, an electoral process that has suffered many interferences from politics through a political operator who is the Comptroller CELI, and through the prosecutor office that have tried to pressure the NEC. After all this, they even tried to leave aside the progressive tendency in the country, but we continue in the struggle, Arauz.
Part of the observations issued by the National Electoral Council was to correct the replacement of former President Correa by Carlos Rabascal.
We already comply with the term the TCE gave us to replace Correa with the legal action. This was in suspension. Now the TCE will have to proceed with the qualification of the binomial. Once the resolution of the contentious tribunal is executed, there should not be any legal restriction to participate in the upcoming elections.
Given this pronouncement, the Citizen Revolution Party and different sectors point out that there should no longer be any reason for the TCE not to confirm the inscription of the binomial.
Como en el Ecuador hemos vivido años de persecución.
As in Ecuador, we have lived through years of persecution, of political blockade, and we no longer act under the constitution, but under political slogans. We were very worried that the organizations would not act in a legal way. However, the Electoral Tribunal and the TCE have determined that the replacement is legal, and that the Arauz-Rabascal binomial will be confirmed.
According to the NAC, up to now there are 7 political movements firmly qualified, 5 qualified and 3 in the period of correction where the binomial union for hope is still placed.
Denise Herrera, TeleSUR Quito, Ecuador.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Bolivia's president-elect Luis Arce announced he will restore relations with Cuba and Venezuela. Bolivia's elected president Luis Arce said that he will carry out a foreign policy on restoration of his relationships with Cuba, Venezuela and Iran. The president-elect stated that the de facto government had acted very ideologically, depriving the Bolivian people of access to Cuban medicine, Russian medicine, and advances in China. Arce added that for a purely ideological issue, the de facto government exposed the population in an unnecessary and harmful way. Having counted 79.5% of the ballots cast in Sunday's general elections in Bolivia, the movement towards socialism presidential candidate Luis Arce has officially secured a landslide victory. President-elect Luis Arce secured over 2.5 million votes, which represents over the 50% of the total number of ballots counted so far. Meanwhile, the candidate for the Citizen Community Alliance, Carlos Mesa, obtained more than 1.4 million votes, which reflects 29.92%, while the candidate for the We Believe Alliance, Fernando Camacho, gained almost 723,000 votes, representing 14.93%. Noting a turnout of 87.97%, the official report by the electoral authorities indicated that more than 5 million citizens voted in Sunday's general elections, of which over 4.8 million voters were validated of those counted so far. And the United States government has extended sanctions on companies involved in Russian Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline project in a move to reduce Russia's insertion in the European Union's energy market. The announcement was made by the Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Bureau of Energy Resources, Francine Fanon, during an interview with local media. The measure will affect all companies, regardless of their nationality, that provide equipment or funding, as well as undertake works on the modernization or adaptation of vessels involved in the Russian pipeline project. According to Fanon, the move is part of a set of sanctions that the United States government is planning to impose in order to reduce Russia's control on the European Union's energy sector. Greece authorities have called on the European Union to put a halt to military equipment exports to Turkey, claiming that the gear is being used by Turkish authorities to destabilize the region. Meanwhile, Greece has also announced the beginning of talks with Albanian authorities to delineate maritime borders between the two countries.
I stressed to my European counterparts, my foreign ministerial colleagues, the recent extremely worrying illegal actions in the Eastern Mediterranean. and I underlined the need to stop the export of military material and military equipment to Turkey, given that this equipment is being used in actions that destabilize our region. Even with the Prime Minister Edi Rama, but also with the Minister of Foreign Affairs Kakak, before, we discussed the issue of delineating maritime zones between Greece and Albania. Resolving this difference would be beneficial to both our countries. Also, I listened very closely to Mr. Rama. The solution of this will be a blueprint for the agreement, which the two countries will sign and will be in accordance with the UN. And I am particularly happy to repeat what the Prime Minister just said, that having examined this issue exhaustively, we agreed to move forward, Greece and Albania, jointly, to submitting this issue to international justice, to the International Court of The Hague.
And British authorities have decided to place the Greater Manchester region under the highest COVID-19 alert level, as the area has now recorded more patients in hospitals than those hospitalized in the entire southeastern and southwestern parts of the country. The UK government recently adopted a three-tier system ranking areas as medium, high or very high risk for COVID-19.
This evening, informed by the data that we've just seen, I can announce that Greater Manchester will move to the very high alert level. That means that pubs and bars must close unless they're serving substantial meals. Households can't mix indoors or in most outdoor settings. In some public outdoor spaces, groups must be limited to the rule of 6. And we strongly advise against travel into and out of the area.
In Ireland, Prime Minister Michael Martin this Tuesday addressed in a press conference new restrictive measures in the European country to halt the number of COVID-19 related deaths.
To suppress the virus, we have already introduced what is probably Europe's strictest regime. As a result of this, we can see some evidence that these restrictions have been effective in slowing the growth and spread of the virus. However, as the daily figures show, these restrictions on their own have not been enough to significantly reduce the levels of infection. So while we have slowed the spread of the virus, this has not been enough, and further action is now required. The government has decided that the evidence of a potentially grave situation arising in the weeks ahead is now too strong. Therefore, for a period of 6 weeks from midnight on Wednesday night, the entire country will move to level 5 of the framework for living with COVID-19.
United Nations officials have addressed the humanitarian situation regarding Rohingya refugees in Myanmar, while highlighting the need for stronger international support and efforts to find solutions for what they describe as a stateless and displaced population.
Across this entire region, most Rohingya live on the margins of society, and they need to be assured access to basic healthcare, clean drinking water, a reliable food supply, or meaningful work and educational opportunities. The COVID-19 pandemic has worsened their living conditions, made access to services even more challenging, increased the risk of sexual and gender-based violence, and exacerbated the impact of infectious diseases for displaced Rohingya living in the crowded camps, such as those in Cox's Bazar and in Rakhine State.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Turkish army began the withdrawal of its troops from 3 of its observation points in the zone of distension, established in the northern province of Idlib and its surroundings, as an action which may result in the possible start of a joint Syrian-Russian military operation against terrorist strongholds in the last stronghold on Syrian soil. The Turkish military that began the withdrawal of the 3 observation posts will be relocated to other points in South Idlib and in the far northwestern of Hama, areas occupied by the extremists who, despite the 2019 cessation of fighting, continue to engage in provocations against Syrian military positions and presidential areas. Rwanda's Foreign Minister Vincent Biruta on Tuesday met his Burundian counterpart Albert Shihiro to improve relationships which have been on a downswing since 2015. This encounter is the first of its kind since 2015, when the ties between the two countries became deteriorated after Burundi accused Rwanda of hosting and supporting perpetrators of the 2015 coup plot against the Burundian President Pierre Nkurunziza. Prime Minister Biruta said that Rwanda is willing to play its part to improve bilateral relationships with Burundi, thus enable the citizens of the two countries to coexist as they used to which he has responded that there was no doubt that both shall have fruitful discussions towards restoring their bilateral relationships. And Burundi's ex-president Pierre Buyoya has been sentenced to life in prison in absentia over the assassination of his successor in 1993. Buyoya was on Monday convicted for an attack against the head of state over his role in the killing of the first democratically elected president, Melchior Ndadaye, during a coup d'etat which plunged the country into civil war. Aside of Buyoya, 18 high-ranking military officials and civilians who were close to him received the same sentence. Another 3 people were sentenced to 20 years in jail for complicity in the crimes, and the former Prime Minister Antoine Duwayo was acquitted. Representatives from the African Union observation mission to Guinea's presidential election held on Sunday have noted that the electoral process was conducted properly, while calling on all political parties to maintain a climate of peace and to avoid inflammatory speeches.
The presidential election of October 18, 2020 in the Republic of Guinea took place in a tense electoral political context, giving rise to legitimate fears of serious violence. However, the mission was pleased to note that despite such a risk, the elections were held in a transparent, secure, calm and peaceful environment, once again demonstrating the maturity of the Guinean people and political actors. Recommendations to political parties and political actors: preserve the current climate of peace in a spirit of conciliation, avoiding inflammatory speeches and acts of defiance, demonstrate the democratic and republican spirit by respecting the official results proclaimed by the competent authorities and using legal channels in case of any challenge.
And in the Sahel country of Burkina Faso, a refugee camp run by the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs has experienced an increase in the number of internally displaced people who have fled conflict in border areas with Mali and Niger.
We were fine. Then at the start of the crop season, we saw them come around our town and kill 22 people. 3 days later, they came back to kill 4 people. We eventually fled here. What I'd like to add is to ask for support because we are in dire straits. When you have 5 or 6 children and you have nothing to give them, that is misery. The children cry out of hunger and thirst. If you don't have anything, what can you do? And there is no work to remedy this. Today we find ourselves with enormous needs, especially in terms of water, hygiene and sanitation. And in terms of education, we are faced with risk over child protection, risk of recruitment into armed groups. We also have enormous need of shelter and essential household items.
Tourism sector employees mobilized in Tunisia on Tuesday to demand state support in the midst of the COVID-19 triggered economic crisis.
We're left behind in a way because there has been no production in the travel agency business for several months. And today, with no concrete support, no implementation of the promises made by the government a few months ago, I can say that this sector will very soon disappear from Tunisia. We are here today. It is our day of anger. We can no longer remain in this type of situation, as it is very precarious. We have a frightening percentage rate. As of today, 85% of travel agencies practically intend to close soon.
Authorities in Nigeria have imposed an indefinite 24-hour curfew in the country's largest city, Lagos, following almost 2 weeks of demonstrations against police brutality. The decision was approved by Nigeria's police chief, who ordered the immediate deployment of anti-riot forces nationwide due to an increase in attacks of police facilities. Meanwhile, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry has claimed that the demonstrations have caused an estimated $1.8 billion in losses so far, adding that the economic activities have been crippled in most parts of the country over the past 12 days. Demonstrations have increased in Nigeria since October the 5th, despite the government's decision to dismantle the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, which is accused of widespread human rights abuses. And we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also you can join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.